7 simple things that control your anger immediately. Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever said something in anger, something you couldn't take back, and watched the expression on someone's face just change? Maybe it was a partner, a co-worker, a friend. Maybe it was your own kid. And even as the words were leaving your mouth, some part of you was screaming stop, but you couldn't stop. The anger had already taken the wheel. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're human. But here's the thing. Staying trapped in that cycle? That's optional. Because anger is not a life sentence. It's a signal. And once you know how to read that signal and respond to it, everything changes. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 simple things that control your anger immediately. Not theories. Not textbook advice that sounds good on paper but falls apart in real life. These are practical, science-backed, field-tested tools that work in the moment. When your chest is tight, your jaw is clenched, and your brain is firing on full emotion. We're going to go deep today. I mean really deep. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. And before we start, if you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, we drop content just like this, content that actually helps you show up better in your life, your relationships, and your mind. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe. Let's go. Section 1. Understanding anger first. Before you can control it, you have to understand it. Most people try to control their anger without understanding what anger actually is. That's like trying to fix a car engine without knowing what's under the hood. You'll just make a mess. So let's start here. Anger is not the enemy. I want you to hear that clearly. Anger is not the enemy. Anger is a natural, neurological, evolutionary response that your body uses to protect you. When you perceive a threat, whether it's physical danger, disrespect, injustice, or a violation of your values, your brain triggers the fight or flight response. The amygdala, which is the emotional alarm center of the brain, fires up. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate spikes. Your muscles tense. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of your brain, starts going offline. And suddenly, you're not thinking anymore. You're reacting. This whole process can happen in less than a second. Researchers call it the amygdala hijack, a term coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman. Your emotional brain literally overrides your thinking brain. And from that moment, every word you say, every action you take, is coming from a place of primal reactivity rather than conscious choice. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The average person thinks anger is caused by what happens to them. Traffic. Un rude comment. A broken promise. Someone cutting in line. And yes, those things are triggers. But the anger itself, the intensity of it, the duration of it, the way it takes over, that comes from somewhere else entirely. Anger is almost always a secondary emotion. Underneath the anger, there's usually something else first. Fear, hurt, shame, rejection, a sense of powerlessness, a feeling that something important to you has been violated or dismissed. Think about the last time you got really angry. Not just mildly annoyed, really, genuinely furious. What was underneath that? Were you actually scared? Were you hurt? Did you feel disrespected? Did you feel like you weren't being heard? When you can answer those questions, you start to understand your anger at a whole new level. And when you understand it, you stop being its passenger and start being its driver. This is the foundation everything else we talk about today is built on. Anger isn't happening to you. It's happening in you. And that means you have far more influence over it than you think. Okay. With that foundation in place, let's get into the 7 things. Thing 1. The pause principle. Buy yourself time between stimulus and response. The single most powerful tool in your anger management arsenal is something so simple it almost sounds stupid. Ready. Pause. That's it. Pause before you respond. Create a deliberate gap between what happened and what you do next. I know. You're thinking, I've heard this before. Count to 10. Take a breath. Everyone says that. And you're right. Everyone says it. But almost nobody does it consistently, because almost nobody understands why it works on a neurological level. And when you understand why something works, you're 1,000 times more likely to actually do it. Here's what happens in your brain when you pause. When the amygdala fires and hijacks your rational brain, it doesn't stay hijacked forever. The prefrontal cortex starts fighting back almost immediately, trying to reestablish communication, trying to process the emotional signal, trying to regain control. But that process takes time. Research suggests it takes anywhere from 6 to 10 seconds for the prefrontal cortex to begin reasserting itself after an emotional trigger. Which means, if you can just hold on for 10 seconds, your rational brain starts coming back online. And here's the thing about those 10 seconds. They don't have to be passive. You don't just sit there awkwardly. You fill them with intention. The pause protocol. Step 1. Name it. The moment you feel anger rising, say to yourself, not out loud, internally I'm angry right now. This sounds almost too simple, but neuroimaging studies have shown that the act of labeling an emotion, actually putting a name to it, reduces amygdala activation. It literally calms the emotional brain down. Researchers at UCLA found that affect labeling, naming your feelings, decreases emotional reactivity in real time. This is why therapists always ask, how does that make you feel? It's not just therapeutic nicety. It's neuroscience. Step 2. Drop the anchor. While you're naming it, shift a small amount of your attention to something physical. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Press your fingertips together lightly. These physical anchors pull your nervous system out of threat mode and into the present moment. They remind your body, I am safe. I am here. I can choose. Step 3. Delay your response by one single breath. Not 10 breaths. Not a whole meditation session. Just one. Slow, deliberate, deep. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. One breath is enough to interrupt the automatic reactive pattern and insert a moment of choice. Step 4. Then respond. From that place. Not from the heat. From the pause. Now, let's be real. This is genuinely hard in the beginning. When someone says something that lights your fire, the last thing your brain wants to do is pause. The brain wants to react. It craves the release of an immediate response. Anger has its own momentum, and momentum doesn't like being interrupted. But here's the key insight. The ability to pause is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Every time you successfully pause before reacting, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways. You're building what neuroscientists call inhibitory control, the ability to suppress an automatic response and replace it with a chosen one. Over time, the pause starts to happen more naturally. The window of reactivity gets shorter. The space between stimulus and response gets wider. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is the pause. And it is everything." Practical application. This week, identify your top 3 anger triggers, the specific situations that reliably set you off. Write them down. Visualize them. And then mentally rehearse your pause. Actually see yourself in that situation, feeling the heat rising, and then see yourself pausing, naming it, dropping the anchor, taking the breath, choosing your response. Rehearsal matters. Athletes don't just show up on game day without practice. Neither should you. Thing 2. Regulate your body, not just your mind. Your body is the first place anger lives. Here's something most people get backwards. They try to manage anger by managing their thoughts. They try to reason themselves out of it. They try to think positive. They try to remind themselves to calm down. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because anger lives in the body first. Before it's a thought, it's a sensation. Before it's a story, it's a physical event happening in your nervous system. And if you want to change the emotional state, you have to change the physical state. Let me say that again because it's that important. To change your emotional state, you have to change your physical state. The nervous system has two primary modes: sympathetic, fight or flight, activated, threat response, and parasympathetic, rest and digest, calm, regulated, safe. Anger is a sympathetic state. To reduce anger, you need to shift your nervous system toward parasympathetic activation, and the most direct route to do that is through your body. Method 1. Physiological sigh. This is one of the most well-researched tools in stress and emotion regulation right now. It comes out of neuroscientist Andrew Huberman's work at Stanford, and it's devastatingly simple. Take a double inhale through the nose, a full breath, then a little extra sniff on top, and then one long, slow exhale through the mouth. That's it. The double inhale fully reinflates the tiny air sacs in your lungs called alveoli, which tend to partially collapse during stress. The long exhale activates the vagus nerve, which is the main conductor of the parasympathetic nervous system. When you activate the vagus nerve, you quite literally downshift your nervous system from threat mode to calm mode. Heart rate drops. Cortisol levels begin to fall. The amygdala quiets down. One physiological sigh can measurably lower your state of physiological arousal within about 30 seconds. That's not metaphor. That's measured in labs. Try it right now. Seriously. 2 quick sniffs through the nose, long slow exhale through the mouth. Feel that little shift? That's your parasympathetic nervous system coming online. Method 2. Cold water on the face or wrists. This isn't just folk wisdom. It's backed by the science of the diving reflex. When cold water contacts the face, particularly around the eyes and forehead, it activates a physiological reflex that immediately slows the heart rate. The vagus nerve is stimulated. The sympathetic response is interrupted. There's actually a technique used in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, called TIP, temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, paired muscle relaxation, and temperature is listed first for a reason. It's one of the fastest ways to interrupt a high emotion state. When you feel anger spiking, go to the bathroom and run cold water over your wrists and forehead. Within 30 to 60 seconds, your physiological arousal will begin to drop. Method 3. Progressive muscle relaxation, PMR. Anger causes muscles to contract and tighten throughout your body. Your jaw clenches. Your shoulders rise. Your hands might curl into fists. Your stomach tightens. This muscular tension actually feeds the emotional state. It's a feedback loop. Tense muscles signal to your brain, there is a threat. Stay activated. Progressive muscle relaxation breaks that loop by deliberately tensing and then releasing jaw muscle groups. You start at the feet, tense the muscles hard for 5 seconds, then release completely. Move up through the calves, thighs, abdomen, hands, arms, shoulders, neck, and face. The contrast between tension and release teaches your nervous system what relaxed actually feels like, and gives it a roadmap back to that state. You don't have to do the full protocol in an anger moment, obviously. But even doing it for your jaw, shoulders, and hands, the places where anger most commonly lives, can create a noticeable shift in real time. Method 4. Movement. When your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline in preparation for fight or flight, the most biologically coherent thing you can do is move. Your body prepared for action. Give it action. Not destructive action. Constructive movement. Walk briskly around the block. Do 20 jumping jacks. Run up and down the stairs. Hit a pillow. Do push-ups. Exercise metabolizes the stress hormones. It burns through the cortisol. It gives the nervous system the physical outlet it was actually primed for. A 2010 study published in the journal Cognition and Emotion found that physical activity was one of the most effective immediate strategies for reducing anger and improving mood. Not because exercise is magic, but because anger is a physical state, and physical action is its natural release valve. The key insight here: don't try to think your way out of anger before you've regulated your body. That's like trying to have a calm conversation in the middle of a fire alarm. Get the body settled first, then engage your mind. Thing 3. Reframe the story you're telling yourself. Anger is always built on a narrative. Anger doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always connected to a story, a specific interpretation of events that your mind has constructed. And here's the thing about stories: They're not the same as facts. They feel like facts. They're convincing as facts. But they are constructions. They are interpretations. And interpretations can be changed. Let me give you an example. You text a close friend. Hours pass. They don't reply. You start to get irritated, then annoyed, then genuinely angry. By the time they finally respond, you're cold and distant. They can feel it. There's tension. What's the story you were telling yourself in those hours of silence? Probably something like, they're ignoring me. They don't respect my time. I must not matter that much to them. I always put in more effort than they do. Now, is any of that true? Maybe. But maybe their phone died. Maybe they were in a meeting. Maybe they were dealing with a family crisis. Maybe they dropped their phone in a parking lot. Maybe they fell asleep. 100 explanations exist that have nothing to do with how much they value you. Your anger was not created by their silence. Your anger was created by the story you built around their silence. This is cognitive reframing, and it's one of the most powerful tools in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea is simple. When you change the story, you change the feeling. Not by forcing positivity or denying reality, but by genuinely questioning whether your current interpretation is accurate and deliberately considering alternative interpretations that might serve you better. The 3 reframing questions. Whenever you catch anger rising, pause and ask yourself these 3 questions. Question 1. What am I assuming that I haven't verified? Anger almost always contains assumptions. You assume you know why the person did what they did. You assume you know their intentions. You assume the worst-case interpretation is the correct one. Challenge the assumption. Ask, is this a fact, or is it a conclusion I've jumped to? Question 2. What's an alternative explanation I haven't considered? For almost any behavior that triggers your anger, there are multiple possible explanations. The one your brain defaults to will often be the most threatening one, because your threat detection system is designed to err on the side of danger. But is that the most likely one? What are 3 other possible explanations? Practicing this doesn't mean you're naive. It means you're accurate. Question 3. Even if my interpretation is correct, is my level of anger proportionate and useful? Sometimes your interpretation is right. Someone really was rude. Someone really did disrespect you. And anger might be an appropriate response. But even then, ask, is the level of anger I'm feeling proportionate to what actually happened? And is this level of anger going to help me respond effectively, or is it going to make things worse? The bias toward hostile attribution. Research consistently shows that people who struggle with chronic anger have what psychologists call a hostile attribution bias. They disproportionately interpret ambiguous situations as threatening or disrespectful. Someone bumps into them on the street and they assume it was intentional. A coworker doesn't smile at them and they assume that person doesn't like them. Their boss gives brief feedback and they interpret it as disapproval. This bias is often built from past experiences, relationships where trust was broken, environments where threat was real and constant. Your nervous system learned to anticipate hostility because at some point, hostility was common. And now it brings that lens to situations that don't deserve it. Reframing is how you update that lens. You're essentially training your brain to be a better detective, to gather more evidence before reaching a conclusion, to hold multiple hypotheses simultaneously, to choose interpretations that are accurate rather than automatic. One more reframing tool. Assume positive intent until proven otherwise. Make it a practice. When someone does something that triggers you, before you react, consciously assume the most charitable explanation. Not because people are always good. They're not. But because charitable interpretation keeps you regulated, keeps you communicating clearly, and gives relationships space to breathe. And if the person proves that your charitable interpretation was wrong, then you respond to the facts, not the story. Thing 4. Know your anger style. Self-awareness is half the battle. Not all anger looks the same. And one of the reasons so many people struggle to manage their anger is because they don't actually recognize it when it shows up. They think anger means yelling, slamming doors, or blowing up. But anger is far more complex than that. There are primarily 4 anger styles, and you need to know which one is yours, or which combination is yours. Style 1. The Exploder. This is the most visible anger style. Explosion. Outbursts. Raised voices, sharp words, intense emotional reactions that happen fast and hot. Exploders tend to have a short fuse. Their anger comes out quickly and forcefully. The upside? They process it fast. They release the pressure. The downside? The damage they do to relationships, trust, and their own reputation in those moments can be significant and hard to repair. If you're an exploder, the tools most critical for you are the pause protocol, thing 1, physical regulation, thing 2, and communication skills, coming up in thing 6. You need strategies that interrupt the rapid-fire reaction before it escalates. Style 2. The Suppressor. Suppressors don't explode. They go quiet. They swallow the anger, push it down, hold it inside. On the surface they look calm, maybe even fine. But underneath, the anger is there, slowly building pressure. Suppressors often believe expressing anger is dangerous or wrong. Maybe they grew up in an environment where anger was punished, or they watched anger destroy relationships and made a silent vow to never be like that. The problem with suppression? What gets pushed down doesn't disappear. It migrates. It shows up as passive aggression, little jabs and sarcastic comments and withdrawn affection. It shows up as resentment that slowly poisons relationships. It shows up as physical symptoms, headaches, muscle tension, high blood pressure, digestive issues. Research consistently links chronic anger suppression to negative health outcomes, including increased cardiovascular risk. If you're a suppressor, your work is about developing safe channels for expression. Learning that anger, expressed thoughtfully, is not destructive, it's informative. It tells people what matters to you. It sets limits. It keeps relationships honest. Style 3. The Passive-Aggressive. This style is a combination of the previous two. The person doesn't explode, but they don't fully suppress either. Instead, the anger comes out sideways. Through sarcasm. Through forgetting things. Through being chronically late. Through silent treatment. Through doing tasks badly on purpose. Through undermining in subtle ways. Passive aggression is often unconscious. The person isn't always aware they're doing it. But it's deeply corrosive to relationships because it creates an atmosphere of tension and confusion. The people around a passive-aggressive person often feel vaguely uncomfortable but can't name why. They know something is wrong, but nothing is ever directly addressed. If this is your style, the core work is about developing the courage and the vocabulary for direct expression. Because passive aggression almost always comes from a belief that direct expression is too risky or won't be received. You're protecting yourself from a conflict you believe you can't handle. Style 4. The Chronic Slow Burner. This person carries a low-grade irritation almost constantly. They're not exploding. They're not suppressing acutely. But there's a persistent undercurrent of frustration, impatience, or cynicism that colors their daily experience. They're easily annoyed. Things that wouldn't bother other people bother them. Small inconveniences feel disproportionately aggravating. Chronic slow burning is often a sign of accumulated unresolved stress, ongoing boundary violations, or a deeper dissatisfaction with some area of life that isn't being addressed. It can also be a symptom of burnout, depression, or anxiety. If you recognize yourself here, the work isn't just in the moment-to-moment management. It's in addressing what's underlying the constant simmer. Why knowing your style matters? Because the intervention that works for an exploder might not work for a suppressor. The exploder needs tools to slow down and pause. The suppressor needs tools to open up and express. The passive-aggressive needs tools for directness and self-awareness. The chronic burner needs to look at the bigger picture of their life. Take a moment right now. Which style resonates most with you? Be honest. There's no judgment here. Every style has reasons and history behind it. But awareness is the first step toward change. Thing 5. Create healthy anger rituals. Give your anger a legitimate place to go. One of the biggest mistakes people make with anger is treating it like something that should simply stop. Like it's just a malfunction that needs to be turned off. But anger is energy. Powerful energy. And energy doesn't like to be suppressed, it looks for an outlet. The question is, are you giving it a healthy outlet or an unhealthy one? If you don't create intentional rituals for processing and releasing anger, your nervous system will find its own outlets, and they're usually destructive. Snapping at people, drinking, overeating, numbing out with screens, picking unnecessary fights, getting into road rage incidents over nothing. Healthy anger rituals are intentional practices that allow you to honor the anger, process the energy, and return to a regulated state without creating collateral damage. Ritual 1. The release rite. This is not journaling in the traditional sense. This is raw, unfiltered expression on paper. You write with full permission to be ugly, to be irrational, to say the things you would never say out loud. You let it all out on the page. The rules: write fast, write freely, write without censoring. Don't edit. Don't try to make it sound reasonable. Juste pour it out. I am so angry that I feel like underscore. Part of me wants to Let it be messy and real. When you're done, and this part is important, you destroy the paper. You burn it, shred it, tear it up, flush it. The act of destruction completes the ritual. It signals to your nervous system: this has been expressed, released, and is now done. This ritual works because it gives the anger full permission to exist, without it having to go anywhere harmful. It's expression without audience, without consequence, without damage. Ritual 2. Physical release practices. As we talked about in Thing 2, anger needs physical expression. Create specific physical practices that become your go-to release valves. Some ideas: a boxing bag in the garage that you have full permission to beat. Running or sprinting. Particularly beneficial because the repetitive rhythmic movement also has a calming neurological effect through what's sometimes called bilateral stimulation. Lifting heavy weights. The exertion metabolizes stress hormones, and the controlled, powerful movement can feel emotionally satisfying in a clean way. Dancing hard and fast to music that matches the feeling, then deliberately shifts to something calmer. Swimming. The full body immersion, breath control, and repetitive movement are powerfully regulating. The key here is that you designate this practice before you need it. You don't decide in the height of anger that you're going to go for a run. You already have the habit. The run is already on the schedule. When anger spikes, you go to the practice that's already established. Ritual 3. The anger walk. This deserves its own mention because of how simple and effective it is. Not a leisurely stroll, a deliberate, brisk anger walk. You walk with purpose. You might talk to yourself under your breath. You process as you move. The motion is deliberate. Your arms might swing more than usual. Your stride might be longer. The anger walk does something that sitting still cannot. It uses the mobilization energy that anger generates. Your body activated for action. Walking is action. It's channeled. And as your body moves and your breathing deepens, the emotional state begins to metabolize naturally. Walk until the internal dialogue becomes quieter. Walk until you feel something shift. It almost always shifts within 15 to 20 minutes. Ritual 4. The anger playlist. Create a specific playlist for when you're angry. Not songs that amp up the aggression, but songs that honor the feeling, match the energy, and then gradually transition to something that brings you back down. Start with music that says "I see you, this is real," and move toward music that says "You're okay, you got this." Music has a direct neurological effect on emotional state. The auditory cortex is closely connected to the limbic system, the emotional brain. The right music can literally lead your nervous system from one state to another. Use this deliberately. Ritual 5. The timeout protocol. This one is particularly critical in relational conflicts, arguments with partners, family members, colleagues. Agree in advance, when you're calm and connected, on a timeout signal. À phrase, à gesture, à code word. Something that means, I'm getting too activated to be productive right now. I need 20 to 30 minutes to regulate before we continue this conversation. The research on couples in conflict is clear. Once either partner's heart rate exceeds a certain threshold, around 100 BPM, the conversation is no longer productive. The regulated brain needed for empathetic, nuanced communication has gone offline. Continuing the argument from that place almost always makes things worse. Taking a timeout, and critically, coming back to the conversation after you've regulated, is one of the most effective tools in conflict management. The key is that timeouts must be paired with a commitment to return. A timeout is not abandonment. It's not stonewalling. It's a strategic pause for regulation, followed by re-engagement. Thing 6. Communicate anger without weaponizing it. Healthy expression is a skill you can learn. Here's a truth that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Unexpressed anger doesn't go away. It either turns inward or comes out sideways. Which means learning how to express anger directly, respectfully, and constructively is not optional. It's essential. The goal is not to eliminate your anger from your communication. Your anger is real. It matters. It has information in it. The goal is to express it in a way that actually gets heard, rather than a way that makes the other person defensive and shuts down any possibility of resolution. The difference between venting and communication. Venting is discharge. It feels good for a moment. You get it out. But if it's aimed at the person who triggered you, it usually escalates rather than resolves. Because when people feel attacked, they don't receive the message, they defend themselves. The walls go up. The conversation becomes a battle. Communication is different. Communication is about transfer of meaning. You want the other person to actually understand what happened for you, what you experienced, what it meant, what you need. And that requires a very different approach. The formula: I statement architecture. You've probably heard of I statements before, but I want to go deeper than start sentences with I, because most people get this wrong even when they're trying. The structure is: when specific behavior/event, I feel specific emotion because the meaning it had for me. What I need is specific request. Let's break this down. When specific behavior/event, not when you always or when you never. Not when you're being unreasonable. Specific. Observable. Behaviorally described. When you interrupted me 3 times during the meeting is specific. When you're disrespectful is a judgment, and judgments trigger defensiveness. I feel specific emotion. Not I feel like you don't care. That's not a feeling, that's an interpretation. Real feelings: hurt, embarrassed, dismissed, scared, lonely, frustrated, overlooked, disrespected. One word. Concrete. Vulnerable. Because the meaning it had for me. This is where you explain the why behind the feeling. Because it made me feel like my input doesn't matter. Because it reminded me of being silenced growing up. Because in my family, that behavior meant something was very wrong. This is where the real communication happens. When you reveal the meaning underneath the behavior. This is what allows the other person to understand you, not just hear your complaint. What I need is specific request. Not vague. Not punishing. Not passive-aggressive. Specific. Actionnable. I need you to let me finish my sentence before responding. I need 30 minutes to decompress when I get home before we discuss problems. I need to hear that you heard me before we move on. The timing matters. You cannot have this conversation when you're still in the heat of it. You cannot. Your capacity for careful communication collapses under emotional arousal. This is why the regulation tools, things 1, 2, and 5, are prerequisites for this step. Have the conversation after you've regulated. After the walk. After the physiological sigh. After the anger ritual. Come back to the conversation when you can speak from your center. Firm but not furious. Direct but not destructive. Assertiveness, not aggression. There's a critical distinction here that trips a lot of people up. Passivity says, your needs don't matter, theirs do. Suppressor style. Aggression says, my needs matter, yours don't. Exploder style. Assertiveness says, both of our needs matter, and I'm willing to communicate honestly to find a way to meet both. Assertiveness is not loudness. It's not forcefulness. It's clarity. It's the ability to say clearly what you experienced, what you need, and what you're not willing to accept, without apology, without aggression, and without abandoning the relationship in the process. It's a skill, and like all skills, it gets better with practice. Repair. One more piece here that doesn't get enough attention. Repair. After a conflict where anger played a role, even a conflict that was handled reasonably well, there is almost always some emotional residue. Some tension that lingers. Some trust that needs to be rebuilt. Repair is the practice of addressing that residue deliberately. Repair might look like, hey, I said some things earlier that I'm not proud of. I was more activated than I should have been, and I want to acknowledge that. Or, I know our conversation earlier was hard. I just want you to know I value you and I'm committed to handling this better. Or sometimes repair is just a hand on the shoulder and I'm sorry. I love you. Repair is not weakness. Repair is what keeps relationships alive through conflict. Thing 7. Address the root, not just the reaction. Sustainable anger management is about the soil, not just the fruit. Everything we've covered so far is critically important, and it works. But I want to be honest with you about something. The tools we've discussed are powerful in the moment. They will absolutely help you pause instead of explode, regulate instead of react, communicate instead of attack. But if that's all you do, if you only manage the symptoms without ever looking at the source, you'll be fighting this battle forever. Because here's the truth. Chronic, persistent anger that keeps showing up in your life is almost never just about what it appears to be about. The rage at your partner isn't really about the dirty dishes. The fury at your coworker isn't really about the email tone. The explosion at your kid isn't really about the spilled cup. Those are triggers. But triggers connect to something older. Something deeper. Something that was there long before any of today's situations. What's actually underneath chronic anger? Unresolved grief and loss. Grief that was never fully felt or processed often transforms into anger over time. The sadness about what was lost, a relationship, a childhood, a version of your life you expected to have, hardens into resentment and rage if it never gets to be grief first. Chronic unmet needs. If you have core needs, for respect, for connection, for safety, for autonomy, for recognition, that are consistently unmet over long periods of time, anger becomes the nervous system's way of signaling. This situation is unacceptable. Something needs to change. The anger isn't the problem. The unmet need is the problem. Address the need, and the anger often dissolves naturally. Old wounds being re-triggered. The technical term is trauma triggers, but trauma doesn't just mean catastrophic events. Trauma is any experience that overwhelmed your nervous system's capacity to cope. And those experiences leave imprints. Patterns of neural activation that get re-triggered when current situations resemble the old wound, even slightly. When your partner's critical tone triggers the same fury as your parents' contempt once did, that's an old wound being activated. The present event is 10% of the charge. The past wound is 90%. Learned patterns. If you grew up in a home where anger was the primary mode of communication, where explosive reactions were modeled as normal, where you were taught, explicitly or implicitly, that anger was how you got your needs met or protected yourself, you learned a pattern. And learned patterns are deeply encoded. They don't change just because you intellectually decide they should. They change through sustained, supported, intentional work. Depression and anxiety wearing the mask of anger. This one is under-discussed. Clinical research shows a strong link between undiagnosed or undertreated depression and irritability/anger. Particularly in men, who are often socialized away from sadness and toward anger, depression frequently presents not as sadness but as chronic irritability, low frustration tolerance, and disproportionate anger responses. If your anger feels pervasive, constant, unrelated to specific events, and you also notice low energy, difficulty finding joy, or persistent hopelessness, it may be worth talking to a professional about depression. What addressing the root looks like. This isn't something I can fully walk you through in a single video. It's work that often happens over time, with support. But here's what it can look like. 1. Therapy, particularly CBT, ACT, or trauma-informed therapy. There is still a stigma in some communities around seeking therapeutic support, and I want to call that out directly. That stigma is costing people their relationships, their health, and their peace. If your anger is significantly impacting your life, your relationships, or your sense of self, Working with a therapist is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of intelligence and self-respect.
2. Mindfulness practice.
A regular mindfulness practice builds what's called metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thoughts and feelings from a slight distance, rather than being fully merged with them. You start to notice the anger arising rather than just being the anger. You create what mindfulness teachers call the observing self, the part of you that can watch the storm without being swept up in it. Research consistently shows that regular mindfulness practice over 8 weeks produces measurable changes in the amygdala's reactivity and size. The alarm system literally becomes less sensitive. 3. Honest self-examination. What are you angry about, really? Not the surface stuff. Really? What feels deeply unfair to you about your life? What are you grieving? What do you need that you're not getting? What pattern from your past are you still playing out? These questions require courage to answer honestly. But they are the questions that lead to real change.
4. Value clarification.
A huge percentage of anger comes from violations of personal values, the things that matter most deeply to you. When you know your core values clearly, when you can name them specifically, you understand your anger better. You understand why certain things hit harder than others. And you can make intentional changes to your life that bring your daily reality into better alignment with your values. 5. Community and connection. Isolation amplifies anger. When we feel alone, disconnected, unseen, the nervous system perceives threat. And threat activates anger. Human beings are social creatures wired for belonging. If your life is short on genuine mutual connection, if you don't have relationships where you feel truly known and valued, addressing that is part of addressing the root of your anger. Pulling it all together. Let's bring it home. Here are the 7 simple things that control your anger immediately. 1. The pause principle. Create a deliberate gap between what triggered you and how you respond. Name it, anchor to your body, take the breath. 2. Regulate your body first. Use the physiological sigh, cold water, PMR, and movement to shift your nervous system from threat mode to calm mode before trying to engage your mind. 3. Reframe the story. Challenge your assumptions, consider alternative explanations, and deliberately choose interpretations that are accurate rather than automatic. 4. Know your anger style, whether you're an exploder, suppressor, passive-aggressive, or chronic burner. Knowing your pattern gives you power over it. 5. Create healthy anger rituals. The release rite, physical practice, anger walk, and timeout protocol give your anger a legitimate, productive place to go. 6. Communicate without weaponizing. Use I-statement architecture. Choose your timing, lead with assertiveness over aggression, and commit to repair. 7. Address the root, not just the reaction. Do the deeper work on unresolved grief, unmet needs, old wounds, and learned patterns. Don't just manage the symptoms. Here's what I want to leave you with. Anger is not your enemy. Anger, understood and channeled, is actually one of the most powerful forces in a human being's life. It motivates change. It enforces limits. It protects what matters. It signals when something important is being violated. The goal was never to eliminate your anger. The goal is to become its master rather than its prisoner. The people who have the healthiest relationship with anger are not people who never feel it. They're people who know it when it arrives, understand what it's telling them, choose how to express it, and use its energy constructively. That is who you are becoming. One step at a time. One pause at a time. One choice at a time. You've got this. Hey, before you go anywhere, I need you to do something for me. If this video gave you something, a tool, a shift, a new way of looking at this, hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Because every single week, we put out content just like this, deep dives into the psychology of the mind, practical tools for your emotions and relationships, and real conversations about what it actually takes to live well as a human being. No fluff. No clickbait.
Juste substance.
There is a whole library of content waiting for you on this channel. Videos on managing anxiety, rebuilding self-worth, healing attachment wounds, having hard conversations, building mental resilience. If any of that sounds like something you need, subscribe. And ring that notification bell so you never miss when something new drops. This community is growing fast, and I want you to be part of it. So hit subscribe, leave me a comment below. Tell me which of these 7 tools you're going to start using first, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Seriously. You deserve it.